Hello and welcome to the Dynasty Bell Cows podcast. It is week 6 of NFL action, the second podcast of this week. And we are doing something that we haven't done in a long time, a 3-host podcast. We were finally able to get all of us on the same podcast, Kyle, Evan, and I. And so we are all stoked. We got a lot in store for you guys this episode, but let's go first to Kyle. Kyle, I know you've been busy, haven't been able to get on in a while, but we're excited to have you back.
Oh yeah, I'm so happy to be back. I mean, I've been missing you guys. Been trying to keep up with the football stuff. But it's just life has not allowed me to be on the time limits that we've been given. So I'm just very happy that we could all get together and talk some football because let's be honest, that's what we all love to do.
Yes, well put there, Kyle. All right, Evan, you have anything you want to say before we get going?
Hey, Bell Cows,
it's good to be here.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the Lions last time. They're 0-5, but I am
no more Lions.
Yeah, no more Lions. We've had enough of that nonsense, but I am supporting the one franchise that is sort of a cornerstone of Detroit, the Detroit Red Wings. I've got my Stanley Cups jacket on right here, tricked out with all the 11 cups we've won. It's been a few years, but thankfully they're a team that, has given us some joy. The Lions haven't never even appeared in a Super Bowl. So that's one team we've had some celebrations with, and today's opening night. So I just wanted to give a shout out to my Wings. Hopefully they can upset the defending champion Lightning. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, with that.
If you want the Colts, you can have the Colts for me, buddy.
Yeah.
That Monday.
That was brutal
as well.
Yeah, that was tough. I mean, unfortunately, I did take the Colts +7, so they came through for me there.
All right. Well, we have a jam-packed episode in store for you guys, so we're just gonna get straight into it. And the first thing we want to discuss, week 3, Evan and I going head-to-head in DraftKings. And Kyle, if you want to come up with a team on the spot, you can do that as well while we're doing this. But we're going to go over our teams, and then I'm interested to see what you have to say as well, Kyle. So, Evan, do you want to start with your team, or do you want me to start with mine this time around?
I'll lead it off this time because the last 2 times I've let you go first, and you ended up beating me both times, and I'm not really looking to go 0-3. So let's see if I can change it up. The first thing I'm going to do is start off with quarterback streamer Taylor Heineke at the reasonable price of $5,800. So he's averaging 19 points a game. Yep. He's going up against the 32nd ranked defense, the Kansas City Chiefs. Justin and I talked about how the Chiefs are actually giving up 7. What was it, Justin?
So
on turf.
We don't have to spend a lot of time on this since we kind of talked about Taylor Heineke in the last podcast. It's got us to this point, but the Chiefs so far are allowing 7.1 yards on average against teams, and the Rams, when they had the greatest show on turf, they were only averaging 7 yards per play. So think of it that way. That's how bad the Chiefs defense has been this year. But let's hear the rest of your team.
Yeah, so Taylor Heineke is my quarterback. I got Kareem Hunt and Darrell Williams at running back. Darrell Williams is going to be getting the head start this week with CEH going to be down for a few weeks. So I'm looking at an opportunity with him against a bad Washington defense. Jamar Chase, Kadarius Toney, Marquise Brown, 3 guys that have been balling out so far this season. Toney, he's had 2 straight good, solid outputs. And then Sterling Shepard's looking to come back this week, but Darius Slayton's still out and Kenny Galladay is out, Saquon Barkley. So I'm looking at an opportunity for him. Hollywood Brown's the go-to guy there in Baltimore. And then I have Ricky Seals-Jones at tight end. He's the starter for Washington. And then I've got Christian McCaffrey as my flex. He's going to be coming back this week, hopefully. I know he's questionable, but I'm taking the risk that he's going to be playing this week. I'm a little worried. And then my defense is the Panthers.
I respect your team a lot. I like that you went for those risks. And I think in any other week, this would be a great team. But unfortunately, a lot of those guys are pretty injury prone right now, and they're actually dealing with some injuries. We're talking about Kareem Hunt. He did not participate in practice today. That's a bad sign. Same with Christian McCaffrey. He did not participate as well. I think I'm not sure, but Darius Toney, I think, is injured as well. There's a chance that
Yeah.
he might not suit up. And I think there was one more player that you named that might actually not play this week. So I really like that team as a whole. I'm just concerned, you went with the injury prone guys, maybe at a discount. But if one of those guys doesn't play, that's gonna make a huge difference.
Yeah, unfortunately, when I picked these players, they weren't questionable.
Mhm.
So that sort of changed things. But a lot of times teams rest their players throughout the week. They
Okay.
don't practice them on Wednesday, don't practice them on Thursday. I'm really looking at the Friday practice. That's kind of the last resort. Typically, if a player doesn't practice on Friday at all, he's out for Sunday. If he's a limited participant, then he's more probable for a Sunday contest. So I'm not too concerned if one of these guys doesn't practice at all on Friday, then I'm going to start, expecting maybe an 0-3 start to our competition.
That's fair. Don't panic quite yet. A lot of people, including I sometimes, we like to panic and it ends up backfiring. Those guys, we didn't need to worry about them as much as we were. We've seen it before. I think the Bucks, everyone we're talking about, oh, the Nets. This is a total different cross sport analogy, but the Bucks, I know because I'm a Nets fan. They were down 2-0. Everyone counted them out. They came back. So, like you're saying, everyone counts them out for this week, but there's a chance that they may play. But I'll tell you what, though, if the status for their injury changes throughout the week, I'll let you make a last minute change, like just so we get a good matchup going, just because I feel like that's unfair
Yeah,
for
if
both
somebody's
sides.
ruled out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I agree with him. If they
Okay.
practice on Friday,
Yeah, I think that's fair. Just because, if this was a live roster, we would be adjusting our lineups. Depending on, oh, this guy's ruled out, then I'm gonna put Hubbard in.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about daily football is you're not succumb to injuries like you are on a roster, that you do for a year, or even a dynasty roster where just not a lot of depth to go for, So, even in a 1-year league, there's usually somebody, if your running back's hurt, you could probably go get a running back, you know what I mean? And like somebody's going to be out. There's going to be opportunity for somebody, it's the same thing with the DFS, in fact, those are probably end up being some of the best value plays, because if they're not projected early in the week, say a guy like Claypool is projected to be the points leader on Steelers this week with Juju out, and then all of a sudden he doesn't play on Sunday. And Washington's almost going to see double-digit targets, and I'm sure he's probably almost nothing on a DraftKings site.
I was surprised with how little some of the guys cost. We had guys like TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews costing about as much as players like Christian Kirk at the receiver position and a lot lesser known names. So there was definitely a lot of strategy there. So Kyle, you're a big fan of Evan's team?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's the way you kind of want to do it. You shouldn't be banking your if you're playing in DFS, it's also a different strategy you guys are doing, because y'all are going heads up against each other. But so you might want to be a little bit less risk averse, because you guys are probably going to have different types of rosters. But we discussed this before the draft. If you're in like a big contest, and I look at that kind of stuff, I ended up liking to do really go a true outliers. I'm not just looking for a player that oh, he's got a good matchup in this, that, and he's good value. I want to go for a player that literally nobody's going to pick. And so a lot of times that could be a guy that you find out on Friday or even Sunday, when a guy's completely out, and you just find a fourth receiver on team and he catches 2 touchdowns, because he gets more snaps than he normally would. I think that's a really good strategy. As far as the tight ends, I mean, I don't understand why those guys would be listed with guys like Christian Kirk, is unless they're just FanDuel just consider those guys more doubtful than probable. The problem with a lot of tight ends, they'll put them out there. Teams will put those guys out there and use them as decoys. I've seen it year after year with Gronk, and players of his stature. They'll put them out there and they're not really actually playing, even though they're out there. You know what I mean? So you'll see that a lot with the tight end position. So, this is something to keep in mind. If you think that a guy really is a little banged up, that you might allude to right now.
All right, Evan, I feel like you have a high bar set for me. So let's see if I can top it, or if Kyle thinks that your team will reign supreme this week. So at the quarterback position, last week I went for Trevor Lawrence. He helped me get the W, but this week I'm going with a little bit more of a safer option. Justin Herbert. He ended up costing me 7,300. At the running back positions, I went with two guys that are both actually on my redraft team, Darrell Henderson and DeAndre Swift. One is 6,000, I think Henderson, and then Swift is 6,300. And at the receiver position, I was really happy with some of the guys that I got this week. First off, I had him 2 weeks ago, Michael Pittman. I got him for 5,500. And then Terry McLaurin, 7,100. I'm with you. I think that Taylor Heineke is going to be able to exploit that Kansas City defense. And there's only really one reliable receiver in the offense right now, and it's Terry McLaurin. The other receiver, like you, Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown, having himself a big year.
Yeah, he is.
Big time performance. Helped your brother pull out the victory over me this past week in our listener league, Kyle. And then at the tight end position, Hunter Henry. These last 2 weeks, he looks really good. And Donner Smith, a lot of people were thinking it was going to be a 1-2 punch. Well, quite frankly, it looks like Hunter Henry is the guy right now at tight end for the Patriots. And finally, my flex and my defense, instead of opting for a tight end, I decided to go with Christian Kirk for 5,000 just because I didn't want to tie myself up into too many Lions. That could backfire if they have a bad week. And also, they did cost 100, 200 extra, and I only had 100 remaining. So I thought to myself, you know what? If I go for a guy like Mark Andrews instead of Christian Kirk, then I'm going to have to settle for a Kareem Hunt instead of a Darrell Henderson. That's not a risk I want to take. I'd rather just go with Kirk, especially since neither of those guys are super consistent. And then finally, I have the Minnesota Vikings as my defense. I have to bet against Sam Darnold. I do not believe in him, being a Jets fan.
Huh. That's weird, Justin, because you've been singing Sam Darnold's praises every week. I'm a little surprised now you're against him.
Singing his praise? Well, hold on.
Yeah.
I never called him a great quarterback by himself. I think.
Oh, so CMC being out, is that?
Yes.
Kind of okay.
I think because CMC, that guy helps out quarterbacks more than almost any other player you could put on the field because he could totally rush for 25 rushes for like 150 yards and then get another 10 receptions for 150 yards. He has like a Derrick Henry type.
He's going to play. He's going to play.
We'll see. We'll see.
He's questionable.
I mean, he was supposed to play last week, and then, it's just like he was a late week scratch, so I'm very confident. And the thing about Chris McCaffrey is we've still, in 2 years sample size with him getting injured, he still puts up over 20 to 30 points every game that he plays for. So,
yeah, he's a must have. I mean, even with his injury problems, I would put, I know Barkley hasn't been as dominant when he has played, but those guys, even though they have injury problems, and same thing with Mike Williams. They're going to miss time every season, but when they are in the game, they're such a X factor for that offense, and they demand so much of the targets that, I mean, they're just a great player to have, and you can't really trade them because they're going to win you games on their own, even though they miss time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like your team, obviously. I mean, Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry, he's the dominant target share in that offense.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, he's just such a great route runner. He's fast.
So nobody's going with Mike Williams, huh?
No, he was super expensive. He was like a
killing it.
Expensive receiver. I know, but still, I still can't get those bad memories out of my head because I own him in a dynasty league, and it's been a couple of rough years. So I'm thinking to myself, how much longer can this guy keep it up? Obviously, I think he can. But one of these weeks, he might pull a Sammy Watkins, gets injured in the middle of a game when you're really depending on him. And I don't want to take that risk necessarily against Evan. Oh,
isn't it funny how a guy could literally be the number 2 receiver, put up 30+ points a week, and like you just once a guy burns you a couple times, dude, it's like I'm never gonna get it out of my head.
I know that I wouldn't recommend that for our listeners. That a guy burns you once. Although, okay, here's a
no, it's been multiple years with
but I did that with Raheem Mostert. I drafted him in my redraft league. He's a guy that I've always stayed away from because he gets injured constantly. You have to draft him pretty early. He's very effective when he plays, but he gets injured. So I take the risk on him this season, expect him to be my number 2 running back. And then what does he do? He last 3 plays against the Lions. And
was it even? I thought it was like 1 play. Like I literally thought he got hurt on like the big run.
I think he had like 2 rushes and then he was done. So I mean, it's just that's the game.
I killed my team too. I just drafted him like, oh, if I get 1 year out of this dude, I'm like, I can go get a running back in the first round in my rookie draft next year. I was like, then I'll have a couple young backs and Miles Sanders and CH. Yeah. Now I'm looking at him like I got nothing there. Thanks, Raheem Mostert.
He is old. He just didn't get that chance when he was younger. So
yeah, he had no wear and tear.
An old man getting injured every play.
I'll tell you what, though, you talk about the wear and tear on athletes and stuff. We say this all the time. A lot of times you see it, like, especially like with pitchers and stuff. There's just something about it. I tell you, as a guy that's getting older in his life, and I tell you, once you get to 30 years old, it's just not the same recovery time. And I don't care if you didn't have a bunch of injuries or not. Your just body does not recover the same way it does when it's younger. And you see it unless there's guys that are like a lot of times they're freak athletes. You know what I mean? And if guys can stay healthy, like Adrian Peterson did late into his career. Stuff like that. Like, those guys are really good. And, sometimes you see guys like, LaShawn McCoy, some of those other guys that last into their early 30s at least, and it's just, I'm telling you, when you get to 29, 30 years old, it doesn't feel like a lot different than 28, but it really is. It really is. Until you start getting older, my brothers are 10 years older than me, and they told me, watch out when you get 30. And I got to 30, they go, oh, wait till you're 40. And I'm like, oh man, every 10 years is a big difference. Like, when I was 20 years old, I'd move around, nothing hurt. I'd get, break a back and I'd be back in a week, ready to go run around, but like nowadays it's like, man, those injuries, like, even if they don't catch up, like, I'm just telling you, it's harder to just do anything.
Unfortunately, that's not an area where I have a lot of expertise in.
No, but you can believe me when I tell you it's a real thing. It's a real thing. So, we all kind of thought, I think Evan probably thought the same thing about Raheem Mostert, that like, he doesn't have a lot of wear and tear. If he gets me 1 good year, I'll be happy with him, even if he gives me a half a year, if he's in and out of lineups, if I get 15 carries a game, it's going to be, maybe 150 yards, it's like, but no.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's why I drafted him. I mean, the upside of him being such an explosive running back, I mean, having a pretty easy schedule, obviously the Lions to start off with. Jimmy Garoppolo needs a running back, to be a confident passer. So I started him, he was my start of the week. I thought he was going to have a huge game. And then sometimes you think you make the right move and then, it just doesn't work out. And there's been guys this season that their whole teams have been just decimated by injuries. Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook. I mean,
it's every team. There's no good running backs this year. There's none. There's like Derrick Henry. And there's
Derrick
Kamara.
Cordell Patterson.
I mean, guys like Cordell Patterson and James Robinson, guys like them are.
James Robinson has been the stud. I was telling everybody in the offseason, I was like, I'm the guy that was traded. I traded him literally the week of the draft because I just had a weird feeling that the Jaguars and Urban Myers was just going to do something stupid. And they did it. And they drafted a running back with one of those first round picks. And I don't know why, but I just had that feeling that they were going to do that. And people were like, what the hell did you have, like insider trading when I was making those moves? And, but I wasn't selling cheap. I was selling for guys like, AJ Brown and, all that stuff. And then I was almost like getting this weird feeling back, after that draft, and everybody's like, oh, he's like barely worth a second round pick now. And I was like, man, this is the time to buy James Robinson right now. You know what I mean? Because he's still young and he's still like, got the goods. You know what I mean? All it's going to take is a couple more good games and people are going to be right back on the buy train, And, I didn't pull the trigger on a lot of the leagues because people remembered how much I sold them to them, a week or two before that. They weren't really willing to turn around and give them back to me for nothing, So, it's James Robinson, though, is just, man, I tell you, if I had a maybe number 1 pick out of running backs right now, it might be him, to be honest with you.
Wow. Okay.
Wow. That's a juicy take.
Yeah. I'm still
back to a bang. James Robinson, number 1 in Dynasty.
Well, it's tough because he's still got that. The same problems I had with him, is he's got Urban Meyer as a coach. I've been saying this for literally since Urban Meyer signed there. The same reason I didn't have being Justin talking. The same reason I didn't have Trevor Lawrence as the number 1 quarterback prospect. It's because of the system. and I didn't trust the system and I don't trust the coach. I have not since they took him. You look at the history of college coaches, you got to, for every guy that you got, that actually has been successful. Let me just put it this way. If you know your history of your football, who was the best coach back in the day? It was Nick Saban, right? He lasted less than a year.
Yes.
You also had Bobby Petrino, who was at the top of his game when he was at Louisville. He lasted less than half a year with the Falcons. You look at
Louisville name out of your hat there.
Oh yeah, but let's go back even a little further. What happened to Steve Spurrier when he took over as the Washington head coach? He lasted less than half a year. All these college coaches. What about Chip Kelly or Brian Kelly? Which one? Chip Kelly, right?
Yeah, Chip Kelly and the Eagles. Yeah,
they gave him They gave him a general managership. Yeah, and they gave him a year or two. They gave him literally everything. These coaches don't typically.
The only guy that really worked out, to my memory, is Pete Carroll.
Right.
He was an NFL coach, but then he went back. He was the Patriots coach.
And Kingsbury.
And then he went back to USC.
McVay and Kingsbury are really the two I can really think that have had pretty good success.
Well, even Pete Carroll, he got fired from that Jets job, I think, after 1 year. So it took him a little bit to develop. So maybe it's first try, these guys are all really thrown off by the difference, which makes sense. But second time around, hey, if we give another one of these guys another shot, maybe they might actually turn it around. That's something worth noting because we don't often see that. Although I'll say this, actually, Chip Kelly, he had 2 chances, but Chip Kelly, that's still Chip Kelly.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
just one more fact. It's not even that these guys aren't even getting a chance to last the whole year. These guys are quitting halfway through the year because they're realizing it's a lot more work to work than college than it is to be an NFL coach. You're a lot more in all year round. You're a lot more involved in all that stuff. On the second thing to add on that, these guys can't recruit. And it's exactly the same thing we talked about during that draft show, Justin, where it's okay, yeah, we need a good running back to run our system. It's probably what your boy Myers is thinking, right? But this is not a place where you can go out and give a first round pick and get a running back. It's just not like you can fill your left tackle and your quarterback position and your wide receiver positions and all that stuff in the same season. A running back is very valuable, but is it really that valuable when you don't have the other pieces around it? And I think it's tried and true to this point that it's not. We have less than probably a handful of running backs that are actually franchise changing players over the last 10 years. Peterson, LaDainian Tomlinson, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry. It's about outside of that.
Alvin
I can't.
Kamara?
Was it Alvin Kamara or was it Drew Brees?
It's a good point.
Yeah, those are the players that I can say those are the best players on the team. That's the only times I can say that those players were the best players, offensive players on the team, or best
I think that last season there was no shadow of a doubt that it was Alvin Kamara. He's the best player on that team because Drew Brees didn't throw the ball more than 20 yards. And without Michael Thomas for an entire season, Alvin Kamara finished as the top fantasy running back player, basically, period. That dude was getting a ridiculous amount of the target share.
Yeah, I'm going to throw him in. I'm just saying, I think there's a lot of running backs that could potentially do what Kamara does if they were given that same position and that same role in the Saints office with Sean Payton. To me, Derrick Henry, you can't replace Derrick Henry on the Titans. You can't replace LT.
Oh yeah. I think Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, and Alvin Kamara are in their own universe. I think Kamara's kind of I told Justin, he's kind of like the poor man's McCaffrey. He's fast. He's a good receiving back, but he's also a strong runner. And then you got Henry. He's just like a mountain of a man, and he can just run over anybody. He's also fast. And he's actually showing off his catching ability this year too, which is why he's been such an asset to have.
And he's a 40-touch guy. That's the other thing is Kamara, his whole career. This is, I guess, why I kind of separate him from the other guys. All those guys that I named were 25 to 30 touch guys a game for years. Kamara for most of his career has been literally under 20 kind of guy. The last couple of years he's put more touches on, because they've just needed him. But those other guys I'm naming, and that's what I'm trying to say. If you're going to invest a first round pick in a running back, you need to use that guy 25 plus times in order to justify it.
I have to get in on this because you are not giving my man Kamara any praise or any credit. A little bit, but not nearly as much. This dude went on Christmas last year, 6 touchdown performance won me a fantasy football championship. And here you are saying, oh, any guy could do what Alvin Kamara could do. He's a top 3 receiving running back in the league, and his averages are maybe the best in the NFL. I mean, he is so efficient. The reason he's not getting more touches is because Sean Payton and his offense, he likes to run it his way, kind of like how Pete Carroll wants to run the Seahawks offense his way. If it was any other team, we could be seeing Alvin Kamara get those amount of touches because I think he's just so light on his feet. He's really hard to tackle that he could be a workhorse back, but that's not the way that Sean Payton likes to run his offense. And so, I mean, it just depends. But I think that Alvin Kamara, he's pretty legit. Also, Nick Chubb, if he was given the chance, Nick Chubb, I think he like second in rushing yards last season and maybe first, like top 3 in rushing yards per attempt. If he would have gotten more of a shot, I think he could potentially be a franchise-altering player. But they do have Alvin Hunt, not
Kareem
Alvin
Hunt.
Kamara, Kareem Hunt. I was so focused on the Alvin Kamara argument.
Yeah, I just, and I don't mean to take away from these guys. I just, like I said, back in history, if you look back into history, guys that do it for, and Alvin Kamara, he's like on a trajectory of doing it. If he does it for another couple of years, and I'll be willing to throw him up. But my point is that I don't think that running backs are necessarily what you want to build your team around. It takes a very special one. Let's say we throw Kamara in there. Let's say we throw a Chubb. Let's say we throw, a couple other guys there. The track record doesn't show that most of these guys are much more valuable on a per touch basis than a guy like James Robinson, who wasn't even drafted. And that's the real argument that I'm making. That the investment that was made into James Robinson allowed your team to be a much better team if they would have not drafted another running back in that first round. If they would have drafted another offensive lineman a year from now, they'd still have James Robinson and they would have a better offensive line for Trevor Lawrence.
I love go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. As far as dynasty is concerned, I mean, that's a good argument you make, Kyle, is when we're drafting, what positions are we valuing the most? Can we get a Michael Carter later, or do we take the risk and draft Najee Harris, first? So like, where are we going to place each of these guys? Are we going to draft a Kamara, draft a Henry, draft a McCaffrey? Or are we going to wait and then take a risk on James Robinson or DeAndre Swift?
I mean, yes and no. To me, it's the exact opposite argument that I just made. I know that's not going to sound confusing, but like for real life football, the running back position is not that valuable. It's like you have to actually analyze everything from a different standpoint. And the history has shown if you have a stud running back, an absolute top 5 running back on your team, all evidence shows that that guy stays healthy all year, you have a much better chance of winning the championship every single season that guy is healthy, as far as fantasy. So it's well worth the risk. To me, you should be taking at least 2 shots at those guys in the first couple rounds, despite having really good receivers in those ranges. I mean, it's just how I've always built my teams, and I've always been on competitive because there's always going to be guys like Mike Evans and Mike Williams. And, if you're not going to take a shot on those guys because you're going to be like wasting those 5th, 6th, 7th round picks on guys like, I'm not going to say wasted on guys like Michael Carter, but there's always like the David Johnsons that completely bust out, and all those kind of guys in those range, that those running backs in 5th and 6th round, those guys are not contributing anything to Bites rosters right now. Whereas almost probably all those running receivers like Marquise Brown, all those guys in that range, I bet at least half of those guys that were drafted in that 5th, 6th round range are actually contributing and being very meaningful points.
I like that. That's a good point because we see guys like Marquise Brown, Deebo Samuel, man, he's something special. Cooper Kupp, all those guys in that range, they have been lighting it up. I know I have a league where it's like I had Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, Justin Jefferson at the receiver position, and those guys are just blowing me away. And then there's another league where literally my number outside of James Robinson and Derrick Henry, my next best running back is Tyson Williams. And it's just because receivers like Mike Williams are carrying my team. So I might actually change my approach in a dynasty league. Redraft, I am still going RB heavy just because I like to go RBs, and that has worked for me in the past because it's just a 1-year thing too. So it definitely changes the strategy. What do you think about that, Kyle?
Hey, all I gotta say is you just mentioned Deebo Samuels. How's your Brandon Ayuk Deebo Samuels argument with me looking now?
I'm gonna be honest. But
Justin had Ayuk ranked in the top 15 in dynasty receivers to start before the season started. Yeah,
Wow.
you did.
Oh,
yeah, we
boy.
had a debate. I told him, like, I would just assume have Debo at, a multi-round, discount. I was like, they might be the same,
Yeah,
and Debo might be
I've
better.
heard that. Yeah, I wasn't really targeting Ayuk just because you weren't really sure going into it who was going to be the number one guy. And the reason why Ayuk looked so good is because Debo was struggling with injury problems. But I mean,
He's good.
Debo was the possession guy. He's the one with the speed. But Ayuk did look great last season. I know a lot of people drafted him early.
He's a great buy low.
Yeah, and Dynasty pros, they were ranking him high. A lot of Dynasty experts liked Ayuk, so don't feel bad, Justin. But I mean, who thought Ayuk was going to just be like you said, a decoy this season? They haven't used him at all, and he's definitely more talented than that.
Ayuk is a perfect example of a guy that I would like to buy into right now in Dynasty. Like, absolutely, like 100%. Like, let me get off of some receiver that's like performing really well right now that I pretty much had similarly ranked going into the year as Ayuk. Because whereas Ayuk, I didn't have him in the top of 15, but I still think he's legitimately going to be a top 30. And I think as we've shown with this last 15-minute segment, any player in the wide receiver 30 range can get up to on a given year or a given quarter of the year. Because right now we're about a quarter of the season, right? I'm telling you right now, if you have these top receivers that are overperforming right now is the time to trade them. I mean, if you watch the footballers, I watched an episode on the fancy footballers a year or so ago, and they basically showed, if you trade Robbie Anderson at halfway through last year, you completely dominated that trade because he didn't do anything in the second half of the year. Same with a lot of other players. You could have traded Robbie Anderson, got a guy like T.Y. Hilton as a throw-in and probably got a first-round pick or something, attached to it. You know what I mean? And that's just how, that's how you really kill the game. T.Y. Hilton, nobody wants T.Y. Right now is another good time to go get a guy like T.Y. Hilton. Nobody wants him. And there's just as good a chance that he does what he did last year. You know what I mean? When he comes back from the injury. So you get that guy as a throw-in, same with Brandon Ayuk. You get that guy basically as a throw-in because somebody's looking at him like, I can't play this dude. If I can go get a guy that I can actually play, like a Marvin Jones, that's probably a 50-50 trade. I mean, right now, does this guy, even with Marvin Jones, actually turn around and trade him for Ayuk if he needs him in a deep league? If I have Marvin Jones, in our, is that even a fair thing? If I don't have anybody to put in that roster spot, in that starting roster spot, is that even a fair trade right now? I mean,
no.
I get Ayuk and another thing.
I mean, especially with these buys coming up. I mean, we have the Jets, the Falcons, the Niners.
Absolutely. I've been starting Marvin Jones every game this year.
Yeah. I mean, I have
Marvin Jones, that's for sure.
Number one receiver.
All right, keep going, Evan.
Yeah, so we have the Jets, the Falcons, the Niners, and the Saints all on buys this week. So that means you don't have Alvin Kamara. Marquez Callaway is a little bit of a iffy start anyways, but he did have 24 points last week. The Niners, you don't have Debo. You don't have any of those running backs to worry about because nobody can predict who's going to start. The Falcons, you don't have Calvin Ridley. You don't have Cordero Patterson, Matt Ryan, Kyle Pitts. Corey Davis is out for the Jets. Michael Carter. There's not a whole lot of guys there, but so you gotta look at, okay, who am I going to flex in these spots? So names like Tyler Boyd come up, Darnell Mooney. Who are you guys flexing in some of those spots?
That's a great transition to our next segment. How are we going to adapt now? This is the first week where these teams legitimately have buys, and I know that I have some pretty large shares of some of these guys from these teams, just because I do often have my Jets bias. So although I'm not going to go out early for one of these guys, I'm going to try to sneak in one of these guys in a later round in the dynasty league, maybe a Keeling Holt or a Ty Johnson. Those are guys that I was semi-high on. And I still have been impressed with Ty Johnson. Even though they are starting to give it a little bit more to Michael Carter, I still have been impressed with Ty Johnson's ability. He's exceeding most people's expectations. But you're saying who would I potentially try to slot in? Well, Khalil Herbert is a name that comes to my mind for the Chicago Bears. Yeah. And right now it looks like Damian Williams, I think maybe COVID. He's not going to play this.
Oh, yeah.
He's not going to play. and David Montgomery's not going to play. So
Yeah,
who's going to get all the touches? It's Khalil Herbert from Virginia Tech, I believe, averaged over like 7 yards per carry or something crazy in college. So he's a really legitimate running back that just has completely
lots of
gone under
touchdowns.
the radar. And he actually out-touched Damian Williams last week too. I think it was like 18 carries for like 79 yards, something like that. You can fact check me if you want. But
Yeah, he had
he's a guy with a
18
really good
carries
skill
for
set.
75 yards, 4 yards per
Okay.
carry. So yeah, definitely a solid outing for him.
Yeah, but isn't Khalil Herbert owned in most dynasty leagues? I mean, he was drafted in basically everyone.
Oh, totally. Yeah, he was drafted.
Yes.
But the question is, are you going to take him off your taxi squad to flex him this week?
Yeah.
No, I'm saying you should actually flex him if you need that position filled, because I think he's going to have a big week. I actually in a league I got him today. I think it's kind of crazy. It was still out there. I got Khalil Herbert today, but no, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying just flexing him in general this week. I think he could be a really good option, and weeks to come as well. Even when Damian Williams returns to that offense, I still think he's going to have a big role. And they got that favorable matchup this week against the Lions defense, as you know, Evan. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do.
Khalil Herbert?
Yes.
The Bears are playing.
Oh wait, no, was that a week?
The Raiders? No, not the Raiders. That was last
week.
Green Bay. They're playing
Green Bay. Okay.
Yeah,
Green Bay's all right.
I mean, they're not a great defense by any means. We've seen some teams run the ball against them. But yeah.
That's a good pick, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the Bears, so we talked a little bit about Darnell Mooney. Right now, Allen Robinson and Mooney are both sort of nursing some injuries. As of now, they're both expected to play, but they've been limited at practice. But the problem I have Allen Robinson and Mooney in a couple of leagues, and the problem at this point is Allen Robinson has done nothing all season. He hasn't had, I don't think he's had more than 10 points on the year in one particular week. So, I mean, Darnell Mooney seems to be the guy that gets the targets in that offense. But even with him, I mean, I can't start him, with confidence because Justin Fields just has done nothing in the passing game. I mean, they went up against a Raiders defense that, I mean, yeah, they get to the quarterback, but, they're not particularly great in the secondary. And Mooney and Robinson didn't do anything. So, I mean, at this point, I can't really confidently start Mooney or Robinson as a flex for some of these guys, like Calvin Ridley or a Corey Davis that are going to be missing this week. So I would much rather start a Tyler Boyd against Lions secondary that's had problems. I know you're kind of picking your poison because you don't know, is Chase going to have the big day? Is it going to be T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd? But I would take the risk on Tyler Boyd because he's giving you still like 5 to 7 targets a week.
Well, so Chase might not even play. That's the thing.
Really? Oh, I didn't hear that.
There's a chance he might not play this week. So that would literally leave Higgins and Boyd. So that's an excellent point that you made there.
Boyd's been all right, hadn't he? Like he's actually he's been putting up some points. So I mean, there's no reason to think he doesn't necessarily have his role. I mean, we expected. Well, I mean, me and Justin said we thought he was going to have a pretty good year. I mean, before the season started, even with the other emergence of those two receivers, but Cincinnati's not throwing the ball as much as I think either one of us predicted. So that's something to keep in mind. But like Tyler Boyd seems like he basically still has his role over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
He'll probably still be close to 900 yards. And when he has his touchdowns, you're going to be happy you started him because it'll be like a bunch of short catches.
Well, do you guys agree with me when I say this? Tyler Boyd may be one of the most underrated, if not the most underrated receivers in the NFL, because you bring up
he's not that underrated, but he's underrated.
Okay, well, you bring up that name for like a guy that's not to Kyle or I, and you say, "Oh, Tyler Boyd," and they're like, "Tyler Boyd? I mean, what does he do?" They wouldn't be familiar with this stats. They would barely know who that guy is because Jamar Chase has been stealing the spotlight there in the Bengals, and they got this new shiny toy last year in T. Higgins. And who's this Tyler Boyd guy? Even when he was putting up some of his best seasons, he was getting like 200 fantasy points per season in like a half PPR league. Even so, people are like really even mentioning his name. And everyone says that Allen Robinson's underrated, but is he really underrated? The most underrated after what he's done this season? Is he?
I'd like to see I'd like to see how deep. I haven't watched a whole lot of Bears games this year. I'd like to see how the defenses are actually covering Allen versus Mooney. Just to go back to that topic of what y'all were talking about, because you know, I don't know what's going on there, to be honest with you. And the reason why I don't trust Mooney is not because like the production's not been there, because really the volume should be there enough for him to be successful with the type of receiver he is, which, you know, he doesn't need a lot of receptions. He's a downfield guy. You know, he's getting open downfield. Justin Fields is throwing the ball downfield. They're connecting on some, you know, but it kind of reminds me of the, you know, a Henry Ruggs last year, or a, you know, Marquise Brown. You know, it's kind of the same situation. The problem I have with, you know, but Mooney's getting more volume than those receivers have been getting the last couple of years. So type of receivers, you know, so there's more potential there. But the reason why I can't buy into Mooney is, why is Allen Robinson getting like 4 targets a game or 7 targets a game? Is there something going on with the injury there, or is it the way the defenses are scheming, or is it like Allen Robinson's lost a step, which I highly don't think it is. You know, is this just something that's going to correct itself as the years goes on, and when Allen Robinson gets to double-digit targets, is this offense going to be able to have enough pass attempts to support both these receivers? You know,
I think right now the offensive line is just really bad, and we've seen Allen Robinson pretty much do whatever with any quarterback that he's had. He's always had that production. I could not believe my mind when I saw this. I pulled up the Yahoo Fantasy apps to potentially suggest and pull up another stats of a guy that I would potentially put as a flex this week. And little did I know who was on the waiver wire. It's got to be hard to see. You probably can't. Tyler Boyd. Someone just literally in the last hour
in Dynasty
dropped Tyler Boyd. And so I have a pretty high waiver. You better.
It's play little Denny.
I'm picking up that guy. No, it's my it's my family redraft. But fun fact, Little Denny dropped Robin from Bobby Anderson today.
Did he really? God.
I think I don't know who he picked up, but hey, whatever he's doing it well, because last week he beat my team. So I think he picked up.
I told you he's like the luckiest SOB in the world. Didn't I tell you when we do the draft special, I go, he'd be the type of dude who'll draft players that won't play, and then like all of a sudden, like he'll still win. Like he's a lucky SOB, man.
Hey, I respect that though. You know, you're moving around with your team. You're just going based off like the recent trends, like in a dynasty league, it's a long-term game. But he's just playing week to week, and so far,
I love it. He's so hyped about the league. He sends me text messages every day, like, "Oh, hey, did you see that trade?" Like, what do you think? I'm like, "It's a terrible trade." And the next week, he's like, "Hey, I won despite your terrible advice," you know, like. And you know, but it's kind of funny. It really does remind me, you know, it's like, you know, just because we're up here and we have a show doesn't make us like experts or anything. You know, it's like the thing that kind of makes us a little bit more expertise is the fact that we've all been involved in this for years now. You know, we've got a lot of like just long-term experience doing this, and we're not going to take a 4 or 5, 6 week sample size and just completely throw everything we knew, you know, up to this point away. And so like, that's something where a guy like Denny, he's been basically, I could compare this to like a poker player. Have you ever watched those shows where like the amateurs play against the celebrities play against the professional poker players?
No,
you know,
I haven't.
They knock them out, you know, and those guys do well, you know, here and there, you know.
Yeah.
But over a course of if that guy played 10 games, you know, out of 10, that poker player is going to win 8 of them. You know what I mean? Like the true pros at a sport are not going to win at a super high level. You know, just think of baseball. The best baseball hitter in the game will strike out, or not strike out, but will get out 7 out of 10 times. You know, so, you know, if any person that can come off the street and draft players like Derrick Henry and stuff, they can win some games. And then when that guy turns around and trades Derrick Henry for, I don't know who the hell was it, Diggs. Like, yeah, he still can get lucky, but is that going to be a good formula, like long-term? You know, like how are you going to make up for Derrick Henry's 40 touches a game? Like, it's not a good process to be moving him and only getting like a 1-for-1 kind of deal. Like, this is not good, you know? So
I want to
big props to him. It's not going to last. It's not going to last.
I want to let Evan get some words in here, because I feel like he has some more guys that he's going to be rolling out this week, and we need to give him more of a chance to make some points here. So, Evan, you got something for us?
Yeah, I mean, a guy that I'm starting in my DraftKings lineup, Kadarius Toney, he's been on fire the last few weeks. And the thing with some of these
that.
rookies, I mean, you're taking a risk by starting them just because, they're rookies. They don't have a long history of, production that we can look at over the years. But I mean, I really like Kadarius Toney. He's come out and balled out. He had 10 receptions for 189 yards last week. And he's definitely the go-to guy. I'm not really worried about, even if it's Mike Glennon throwing the ball. I mean, he's so quick and he can get open for those short routes. Barkley's out, Kenny Galladay's out. So, I mean, he's a guy that I see having a lot of value, even if he's not able to get in the end zone. He seems like a pretty safe flex this week if you have Calvin Ridley out or one of those other guys that we discuss. What's your opinion about Kadarius Toney? Are you trying to buy him in fantasy leagues? Are you selling him? What's your opinions?
As long as Toney plays, I'm feeling good about Toney, at least for this week. I'm not necessarily trying to buy him. I do think I have a share of two of Kadarius Toney, so I am happy about that. But I know right now owners are going to be like, well, did you see what Kadarius Toney did these past 2 weeks? They're going to want a ton for Kadarius Toney. They're going to want at least a first round pick. I'm willing to sell Kadarius Toney. That's something I'm willing to do as an owner of Kadarius Toney. If you make me an offer and you potentially trade me a first for Kadarius Toney, I probably would accept that, honestly.
But that's the break-even point.
First.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the break. You're not selling him for a mid-second, though, are you?
No.
Exactly. So it has to be a first. And like, I'm with both of you guys. Like, I'm not buying him at a first, but like, this is a perfect time. Like, if somebody is going to give you a first, because this is a guy that we saw in draft after draft fall into the late second or third round, and I don't know how many times I kept on saying Toney should be at least a mid-round second pick. Like the guy was a first-round receiver for a reason. He was, what some of the scouts said was literally, some of them said that he might be the long-term, he might be the most valuable receiver in this draft class, long-term, and now he's getting the opportunity. So like, if you didn't buy in by now, you're not getting him. There is no discount anymore. He's already proven he can play at the level. And he's now got the opportunity with all the injuries. So like, if he's healthy, all systems go. But yeah, I would be probably looking to move him if I could get a first for sure.
Yeah. What about so out of the rookie class, are you buying in more on Rondale Moore, Jalen Waddle, or Kadarius Toney based on what you've seen so far this season?
Good question.
Who's that? Rondale Moore.
Rondale Moore, Arizona. He's a guy that's shown some explosiveness, but the problem with him is they have Christian Kirk, they have AJ Green, they have DeAndre Hopkins. So I think he's going to have a lot of long-term production value. But I mean, he's a guy that I've kind of been forced to flex this week just because, with these buys, I mean, he's a guy that I'm relying on. So, I mean, it's been tough because he's just not really consistently getting the amount of targets that we are expecting. 1 week he gets 5 and the next week he gets 3, and he's a big play threat. But if he doesn't get those long plays, he's kind of, not going to have as much production as you're looking for.
Who are the other two options you said between him and Toney?
Kadarius Toney and Jalen Waddle.
And Kadarius Toney. Yep.
I still got to go with Waddle out of those three. I think he's got a more solid role long term. Like, I love Toney and I love Rondale Moore, but if we're on like for a week start, if Toney's healthy, I'm probably playing Toney over those guys. But I just like Waddle's just like, Parker looks like he might end up being on the outskirts the next year or so. Will Fuller, whatever. We don't even know what his role is going to be there next year. I think the one Waddle's value is a little bit suppressed right now because like everybody knows they don't really know what Tua is right now. So if Tua steps up and becomes a big time player, and it's like we kind of think he can be, long term, like you're going to get a really good investment because Waddle is. I haven't seen anything in Waddle that makes me doesn't think he can be like a really elite receiver still.
Okay.
Yeah, I would put Waddle and Toney in the same category where they're question marks just because I don't know who the quarterback's going to be. Like, I don't know if Daniel Jones is the long-term solution there in New York. He hasn't won anything. I mean, he's had a good year for fantasy, but as far as being the starting quarterback, he's still having injury problems. He's still having fumble issues. I mean, he's not a very accurate passer. So I'm a little concerned about the quarterback. So I would personally go with Rondale Moore just because I know Kyler Murray's the long-term solution there. He's possibly a top 3 dynasty quarterback. Yeah, and he's very lethal running and throwing. So I just see him being more of a long-term solution with Rondale Moore. And I would like to go with that pair instead of, Rondale Moore or Kadarius Toney with Jones or Waddle with Tua, because I just don't know if Tua is gonna last in Miami.
Why not?
I was not expecting that. Actually, at first, I'm like, so I think I have to go with Waddle. I wasn't expecting Rondale Moore. I think that Rondale Moore can be really good, but again, it's like that offense that I've talked about before with DeAndre Hopkins, and it's kind of like week to week, who's going to be the guy, even Max Williams. It's like, who does Kyler Murray want to make the guy? That's going to be the guy for this week. Whereas Waddle and Kadarius Toney both have a chance to carve out the role as the number one receiver. I'm not very threatened by Kenny Galladay. I haven't seen a lot, and that guy just can't get on the field. I've been super impressed with Kadarius Toney because I've expressed my concern when you, as a rookie, cannot get to practice or training camp. And this dude was basically not a part of that team for the entire training camp, entire preseason. And you can play like as good as he is for barely getting any experience. That to me is telling, even if the receiving core and their guys are injured and they don't have it all together. So I think if I'm looking at it this way, I think that Waddle's the safer bet. I think that Waddle will most likely be the best dynasty receiver. But if I'm talking about home run ability, I think that Toney has the higher ceiling and the higher home run ability than Waddle has at this point. So I'm going with Waddle, but at the same time, I like my perspective on Toney has changed 180 time and time again. But right now, everything, as Kyle can attest, right now, everything I've been seeing, I just got to go with the recency bias.
Hey, I said it during the draft process and even after the draft process, the film didn't lie on Toney when he was at Florida. Trask was throwing balls behind him. He was throwing terrible stuff. Toney was making everything happen after the run. Like, the dude's special. I mean, I really like how you pick these three players because, like, all three of them are kind of guys that, like, we didn't really know how they were going to profile, necessarily, but they're all super athletic, like elite athleticism out of all three of these guys, but they're a little bit, some of them are a little undersized. Yeah, I don't necessarily know if I think any of these guys are going to be number one receivers. So I guess let me kind of go that route. I don't know if we know if any of these guys. Yeah, because like I don't see Rondale Moore's ever. If you really look at some of his, like, the way he's had big games and stuff, most of his stuff has come from breakdowns of the plays and Kyler Murray scrambling, and then he just happens to be the guy open because wherever the defense is left, trailing towards. You know what I mean? So like, you would say like, yeah, this guy's being really efficient with the touches he's given. So maybe when he gets more touches, he's going to be a better player. The problem is I'm not sure that he's ever going to be necessarily more than that. You know what I mean? And as long as Hopkins is there, I don't see it happen. DeAndre Hopkins, I don't see that happening. And so like, he's going to have to compete. So like, the thing is this guy going to be a good player that you could probably throw in your flex here and there and you're going to get big gains out of? Absolutely, for the next few years. But like, is anybody going to really feel great like trading for Rondale Moore until Hopkins is out of the way?
I traded 2 second-round picks for him, so I'm definitely
that's not bad.
Swinging on him. But I'm looking for these receivers. I have Toney and Moore, and I'm stashing them. I'm not trading them. I'm looking for
stashes.
Yeah. When Galladay's gone, when DeAndre Hopkins is gone, when Kirk's contract is up, these guys are going to fill in, and I think they're going to be very reliable wide receiver twos in your offense. And they do have wide receiver twos. Yeah. And they do have that wide receiver one potential. You don't know for sure, but it's worth the risk. I mean, I would personally take these guys over Darnell Mooney or Henry Ruggs for sure.
I agree with you.
I think they're on the same level. I think they're on the same playing field. I think you're right to say like we can look at the offenses and stuff, but like I also feel like a guy like Mooney is like, Allen Robinson away from getting moved in the offseason to being like a guy that like we're all a lot more excited about than all these guys. So like if we're looking at long-term trajectory, we could literally see Mooney being a number one like sooner than anybody, really. You know what I mean? And same with Toney. I mean, there's really nobody that I like. But they're still going to give, when they're all healthy, they're going to give work to the other receivers, like the veterans there. You know what I mean? It's whether you think any of these guys are going to be healthy or not for the next year or two. So like, I always look at fantasy like this. Am I getting a short-term value or am I getting the long-term value? You know, if I'm making a trades, if that's the way I'm actually analyzing it. Am I getting the production now that I need? If I'm not getting the production right now that I need, then I want to take the guy with the longest, the highest upside. So, you know, it's just kind of like what you want. I think Waddle has the highest upside long-term because, you know, they've got the most invested in him first off. And the other part is like, again, I could just see him being good. I just thought he was the best prospect going into this process. So like I'm always going to be biased towards that.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us spent a lot of time, it sounds like, watching the film on these guys.
Yeah.
And I had fun with that before the season started, looking at Chris Sims as, you know, top 5 running backs, top 5 receivers. And then you look at the landing spots, you know, where's the opportunity? Another guy I was super excited about was Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. And I thought that the Ravens was a great spot for him with Marquise Brown
still
dropping, you know, his drop problems. And yeah. And so when he comes off the IR, he's a guy that I'm hoping is going to make a good splash and we'll get to see some of that talent.
Wow. I really thought you were going to say Chris Sims, top 5 quarterbacks. We know who, do you know who number 1 on that list is? Zach Wilson. That made me cringe a little bit. But
yeah, that was before we went to the Jets, though, Justin.
Yeah, that was before we went to the Jets. Even so, though, I don't think you necessarily. I didn't have him as the number 1 quarterback. In fact, I think I had multiple guys over him. So
I think Chris Sims is going to be. I think Chris Sims is going to be wrong about Lance. About Lance, though. Awesome. I mean, just to me, Lance just looks like the last. I know he's a little bit banged up now. They're on a bye, but like, man, to me, Lance is looking. He looked real good. You know, like he looks like the player is going to put up 20+ points out of everybody in the draft class.
Well,
you know, I'm still
offense.
I like Lance a lot. His arm in the preseason when he threw that bomb, like I was like, well, okay, this guy's for real. Like Jimmy G's a very reliable guy. I know Justin's liked him because he's a winner. But Trey Lance, he has that dual threat, you know, capability, and I just think he's a more talented thrower than Justin Fields from what I've seen so far. I've been very underwhelmed by Fields. I mean, I was expecting him to be. I know he's a rookie and everything, a tough offensive line, but he isn't hitting his receivers, you know, very accurately yet. So I'm hoping that he can develop a little bit, but that's been a little concerning. And they're just not using him as effectively in the running game that I was expecting as well. I thought he would be more of like a Jalen Hurts type of quarterback, and they just haven't been running the ball with him quite as much as they do with Hurts in Philadelphia.
I will say that Lance, out of all their quarterbacks, for sure has the highest upside, and I think the highest potential for like an instant production based on the offense that's given to him. I do agree with you guys. I have been very high on Lance as well. I think when it all came, right before the draft, I think I had Lance as my 2nd ranked quarterback in this entire class, talent alone. But there is the other side to that, where like in that preseason game against the Chargers, if that might have been the same game where I threw that bomb. The 2 drives before that, he also threw like 2 like really bad interceptions. So there's 2 sides of Trey Lance right now. I think as a fantasy prospect, he's going to be dynamite, but I still think he's going to work out that kinks before he gets to like a really good level, like a Josh Allen. But you mentioned one other name, Evan. You mentioned Rashad Bateman. I'm going to throw a question out to you guys. Rashad Bateman or Elijah Moore? I'm still going with my boy Elijah Moore, but I'm interested to see what you guys
That's a really good question.
Bateman.
Yeah, it's hard because I haven't seen Bateman play, but I like Jackson more. I like that Ravens offense more. They have a very effective running game, and they're a playoff team. And so I just see Jackson. I mean, Marquise Brown's great and everything, but Brown I don't think is a number 1 guy. I mean, he has the opportunity right now. He's very fast, but he has had drop issues. He doesn't have the height that Bateman has. So I see Bateman coming in and taking that job away from Watkins, especially if he's hurt. But even if he's not, I expect Bateman to come in and immediately take over that position.
Yeah, it's a matter of time. I mean, in Bateman, I'm not sure Bateman is ever going to be like a wide receiver 1 either, you know, as far as dynasty, fantasy. But like the opportunity, like you said, just because I wasn't on the show doesn't mean I wasn't listening to you last week, Justin. You said Lamar Jackson's throwing one of the best deep balls in the game right now. Right?
I think Lamar Jackson is the MVP right now.
So what's your boy Wilson doing with the deep ball?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think that short term that Bateman could be better, but Elijah Moore, I still see it in my guy. He's been battling injuries all season like Rashad Bateman. We haven't even seen 10% of Elijah Moore yet. So we've basically seen as much as Elijah Moore as we have Rashad Bateman. So I feel like we got to give each of these guys a fresh slate. That Jets offense, all those coaches are super new coaches. So they don't have a lot of experience. You got to give that time. Elijah Moore in year 3 or 4, he's going to be, in my opinion, one of the best receivers in the NFL. Whereas I think Marquise Brown is going to be Lamar Jackson's go-to guy. And they also have Mark Andrews. Not to say that he still can be really good, but, with all that he's doing and the guys that they're rushing as well, and normally in a normal year, if J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards wouldn't get injured, they'd be running the ball a lot more as well. So all I'm saying is that's still a crowded offense. And I still believe in the skill set of Elijah Moore over Rashad Bateman. But I like the argument.
Hey, this is just one last thing. I mean, this is kind of goes. I think there's a common theme here. We're 5 weeks in, like we're still going to kind of go with what we thought preseason start. And what was my analysis on Elijah Moore? He was a slot receiver.
Yeah.
And nothing has disproved what I believe going in. So
okay. Well, let me do one more thing before we end this podcast episode. Don't want to keep it too long for the viewers. This is going to be like a trial run of something that I want to do more often. The first time we're going to use this as a segment. I'm calling it Boom Point because it is to the point. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spin a wheel. It's going to land on a random NFL team. I'll either give you a guy or you can change it up and choose your own guy. I want you to tell me what you think about that guy really quick, and then we'll debate about it a little bit more. So, Evan, I'll let you go first. All right. I am going to spin the wheel, and we will wait to see which team it lands on. Right now, okay, Titans. It seems like Titans. All right. So, Titans. Let's go with A.J. Brown for the Titans.
I was hoping you were going to say that, Justin. He's been a very hot topic on our podcast this season. I see Kyle putting the thumb down. I have AJ Brown in Dynasty and in redraft. I've been very disappointed with him. At the very least, I was expecting him to keep pace with DK Metcalf this season, and it just hasn't even been close. He can't even get on the field. Julio Jones didn't play last week, folks, and AJ Brown still didn't do jack. So, I mean, he's been very disappointed. He's not even in the top 40 receivers right now. And at this point, we're asking ourselves, are we going to sell low for him, or are we going to wait for him to bounce back? At this point, I'm going to say you got to hold on to him, wait for his value to go up. I mean, he's still going to get the targets. I mean, he's a very, athletic freak, and they have such a strong running game. I'm going to hold on to him, but he's been very disappointing for me. Not what I was expecting, but I did actually receive an offer. Somebody offered me a first round pick for him, and I said no, because that's not enough. I countered with Michael Pittman, which is a guy that I've really liked. He balled out against Baltimore last week. Yeah, I see him as the number one guy in Indianapolis. You're a Colts fan, so yeah. You want to comment on that, Kyle?
I need a first on top of him for AJ Brown. I'm sorry.
Is it just Pittman straight up for Brown?
No, a first and Michael Pittman.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I'm cool with it. No, that's a perfect move, like for the viewers. Like if you can make that pivot, and that's like what the going price probably was like preseason, but people just weren't going to sell AJ Brown at all, like preseason.
Oh yeah. Don't drop your value if you're disappointed with AJ Brown. You still start him. You close your eyes and you're disappointed in everything, but at the end of the day, you don't want to sell these gold mine pieces, for less than their value for sure.
Yeah,
he's been injured too.
The word that comes to mind with AJ Brown is buy. Actually, you know what I mean? Like, can I get that guy for a first right now? Is that owner completely frustrated? Like I am. I mean, I got him in probably. I probably have him in 10 out of 14 leagues. This is a guy that I was actively trading for over the last 2 years. So it's, my seasons haven't been going great with, guys that are getting injured in the middle of the games. I can recover. I had a lot of depth on a lot of these teams, but you're never going to bench guys like AJ Brown. You're never going to bench guys that are, or your stars. You're not going to bench them. So those are the guys that really kill your seasons. That's what I've learned through the years. It's never like about having a player like, if you lost Barkley last year, or you lost, McCaffrey, you had a chance to go out and get somebody else and play him. The problem is when a guy runs out there every week and gives you 3 points or 6 points, and you're just going to continue to play him, but you cannot afford to bench these players because we see it with Tyreek Hill every single year. We see it with guys like Mike Evans every single year. The second you bench that guy, he's going to blow up, and you're going to feel like you might as well just cash your season. And if you don't get those big games from these players that you invested these high draft round picks, you might as well just pack up your season when if you played them all in their bad games and then you bench them on their good games, you're done.
All right. So I think we all agree by now for that. AJ Brown, but we are going to do one more before we end the podcast, and this is going to be interesting. So we're going to do this. And then we're just going to end it. So Kyle, we're just going to say boom boy and then we're just going to end it just like that. A little bit of surprise ending for this podcast, but that'd be a perfect way to end this out. And so here we go. All right. The mystery team is just past your Colts. Okay. The Chargers. Let me go with, okay, I'll give you two options. You can either talk about Austin Eckler or Larry Roundtree. 30 seconds. What do you got?
Roundtree is really not much of a factor. We saw Josh Kelly start really taking over in that backup role last week. So I'm sure that's up in the air, but like Eckler right now, again, we're talking about James Robinson. Eckler might be RB 1, 2 right now in Dynasty.
Yeah. He's top 3.
Top 3 easy.
Yep.
All right. There you have it. Boom point. Austin Eckler, top 3 running back. We'll see you guys on the next one. Everyone.
See y'all.
Moo.
Moo.
Ooh.